The boy named Aiden had grown up believing that life was something you survived, not something you enjoyed. His mother, Elena, worked double shifts at a small roadside cafe, earning barely enough to keep the lights on in their tiny rented room. Aiden never complained. He knew she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, and he did everything he could to make her smile, whether it was fixing a leaky tap or surprising her with a drawing he made from scraps of old notebooks. She always told him that kindness mattered more than money, even though they never had any. What he didn't know was that his life was about to collide with a world of wealth and secrets beyond his imagination. One morning, a charity van arrived at his school. A billionaire named Victor Hale had launched a program that selected a few underprivileged students for a day trip to his tech empire's mansion. Aiden didn't understand why he was chosen, but his teacher insisted he join. Maybe the universe was finally offering him something good for once. When he arrived at the gates of the massive estate, it felt like stepping into another universe. The mansion was bigger than any building he had ever seen, surrounded by gardens that looked like something out of a fairy tale. The other kids ran around excitedly, but Aiden stayed quiet, overwhelmed. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, grand staircases, and walls decorated with paintings worth more than he'd ever earn in his life. As the groups toured different sections, Aiden lagged behind, drawn to a hallway filled with framed photographs. Most were unfamiliar faces, people in suits, award ceremonies, business partners. But then his heart nearly stopped. On the final frame, next to an enormous window, he saw a picture he knew better than anything in the world. His mother, younger, smiling, standing beside Victor Hale. Aiden's knees weakened. He stepped closer, staring at the image as if it might vanish if he blinked. His mother was wearing the necklace she never took off, the one she said held her memories. The billionaire in the photo had his hand gently placed on her shoulder. They looked close, too close. A quiet panic rose inside him, 1,000 questions flooding his head. Why was she here? Why had she never mentioned this man? Why did a billionaire have a picture of a poor cafe worker? Before he could run, a deep voice echoed down the hall. Victor Hale himself walked toward him, hands behind his back, a polite smile on his face. But when he noticed which picture Aiden was staring at, the smile froze. Aiden swallowed hard and finally asked the question that burst from his trembling lips: "Why is my mom's photo in your mansion?" The billionaire inhaled sharply, as if he had been waiting years for this moment yet dreaded it more than anything. He motioned for Aiden to follow him to a quiet lounge overlooking the garden. Aiden hesitated but eventually sat across from him, heart beating like a drum in his chest. Victor didn't speak for several seconds, and when he finally did, his voice carried a heaviness Aiden didn't expect. He said he had met Elena many years ago when she was a promising scholarship student hired as an intern at one of his companies. Intelligent, fearless, and full of potential, she impressed everyone. Victor explained they had become close friends during a difficult time in his life, when he was grieving his father's death. Elena was the one person who kept him grounded. She encouraged him, challenged him, made him think about people instead of profits. She was the reason he started advocating for education programs for the poor. But then something happened that changed everything. Elena suddenly left without saying a word. A letter arrived weeks later explaining that she needed to rebuild her life far away from the chaos of the corporate world, but she had never explained the real reason. Aiden listened in disbelief. It felt like the world had tilted. His mother had never spoken about any of this. Victor continued, saying that he had spent years searching for her, not because she owed him anything, but because she had been the only person who ever treated him like a normal human being, not a billionaire. And then he looked directly into Aiden's eyes and said the words that made the boy's breath catch. He had recognized Aiden the moment he stepped off the bus. The same soft eyes, the same stubborn jawline. He had suspected it even before the boy saw the photo. Aiden's heart thudded painfully. The billionaire wasn't just revealing a past friendship. There was something deeper in his voice, something unspoken. Victor admitted that he had once loved Elena, but she had left before he understood what that love meant. Aiden's mind raced with possibilities he wasn't ready to face. Victor reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate ring, simple but beautiful. Elena's ring, the one she had lost years ago and cried over for days. He placed it gently in Aiden's hands and said he had kept it safe, hoping one day he would return it to her. Aiden felt tears forming, overwhelmed by the weight of secrets he had never asked for. He didn't know what this meant for his mother, for him, or for the billionaire sitting in front of him. All he knew was that his life would never be the same again. Aiden went home that evening with the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths pressing down on his chest. The velvet box that Victor Hale had given him felt heavier than it looked, as if the small ring inside carried the burden of years of silence, lost memories, and unanswered questions. His mother wasn't home yet, still working her late shift at the cafe, so he placed the box under his pillow and lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every word Victor had spoken replayed in his mind: how he had known Elena, how much she had meant to him, how she had vanished from his life without explanation. Aiden wasn't sure if he felt angry, confused, or scared. Maybe all three. The next morning, Victor Hale arrived at the cafe before opening hours. Elena froze the moment she saw him standing outside the glass door. Her breath caught and her hands trembled, the tray she was carrying clattering onto a table. She hadn't seen him in 16 years, yet the sight of him brought back memories she thought she had buried forever. Before she could escape, Victor gently called her name. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, then walked toward him with the hesitant steps of someone approaching a ghost. Aiden, who had insisted on walking his mother to work that morning, stood beside her. He felt her grip tighten around his hand when Victor greeted her. Her voice cracked as she asked why he had come. Victor didn't waste time. He told her he had met Aiden at the mansion and that the boy had seen the photograph. Aiden watched his mother's face drain of color. She turned away, covering her mouth with her shaking hand. Her reaction confirmed what Aiden had already suspected. She had been hiding something far bigger than a simple job from her past. Victor asked if they could talk somewhere private, and though Elena hesitated, she finally agreed. They walked to a quiet corner of the cafe, and Aiden sat close enough to hear everything. Elena confessed that she had left Victor's world because she had discovered she was pregnant. She had been terrified, not of Victor, but of the life he lived. High society, cameras, shareholders, the pressure of being close to a billionaire. She feared her child would be seen as a burden, a scandal, or a pawn. She didn't want Aiden growing up in the shadow of a world built on wealth and expectations. So she left. She wrote a letter saying she needed peace, though she knew the truth went deeper. Victor listened in stunned silence. He had never imagined the reason she disappeared was to protect a child. His child. Aiden looked at him, seeing the shock and hurt etched across his face. Victor asked the question that had been burning inside him since he first saw Aiden: was he the boy's father? Elena's silence was answer enough. Tears gathered in her eyes as she nodded, and Aiden felt as though the world had tilted beneath his feet. Everything he had believed about his life, the absence of a father, the struggle, the sacrifices, suddenly had a different shape. Victor's expression softened with something between heartbreak and awe. He knelt in front of Aiden, his voice trembling as he admitted he had never known, but he wanted to be part of Aiden's life now, if the boy would allow it. Aiden didn't know how to respond. A billionaire wanting to be his father. It felt unreal, almost impossible. Victor didn't push him. Instead, he invited both of them to dinner at the mansion so they could talk more, promising no pressure, no expectations, just honesty. Elena resisted at first, afraid of reopening doors she had shut long ago, but Aiden wanted answers. He wanted to see where he came from, who this man really was beyond the money and the marble halls. That evening, the mansion felt different than before. It wasn't just a place of luxury, it felt like a crossroads in Aiden's life. Victor had arranged a simple meal, nothing extravagant, as if trying to show he didn't want to overwhelm them. During the dinner he shared stories about Elena, how brilliant she had been, how she had challenged him in ways no one else dared to, how deeply he had respected her. He spoke to Aiden with sincerity, not arrogance, explaining his life, his empire, and the loneliness that came with it. Aiden listened quietly, trying to piece together the image of the man in front of him with the father he had never known. As the night deepened, Victor asked Aiden what he wanted. Not what Victor hoped for or what Elena feared, but what Aiden himself desired. For a long moment, Aiden couldn't speak. He felt torn between loyalty to his mother and the longing he had always kept hidden, the longing to know where he belonged. Finally, he said he needed time. He needed to understand what being someone's son meant, especially when that someone was one of the most powerful men in the country. Victor accepted his words without hesitation, promising he would wait for as long as it took. Before they left, Victor handed Elena a letter he had never mailed, the one he wrote years after she disappeared, telling her he missed her friendship and hoped she was safe. Elena held it to her chest with shaking hands. Aiden watched them, realizing something had been broken between them, but something new was beginning to form as well. As they walked out of the mansion, the moonlight reflecting off the polished floors behind them, Aiden knew his life had changed in ways he didn't yet fully understand. But for the first time, he felt a fragile thread of possibility weaving through the uncertainty, a chance to discover who he truly was and maybe, just maybe, to rebuild the family he never knew he had. Aiden woke the next morning feeling as if the night before had been a dream. But the letter on the kitchen table, left by his mother after she had cried herself to sleep, reminded him it was all real. She had written that she loved him more than anything and feared the world Victor belonged to. She worried that Aiden might get hurt, swallowed by a life that didn't understand people like them. Aiden folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his pocket as he walked to school. His thoughts were a storm he couldn't quiet. For the first time in his life, he had a father. And not just any father, a billionaire with a world completely opposite the one he knew. Victor spent the next few days trying to give Aiden space, but he still found small ways to show he cared. He sent books he thought the boy might like, left messages with the school counselor making sure Aiden wasn't overwhelmed, and even anonymously paid for Elena to have a week off from the cafe so she could rest. Elena figured it out instantly and was furious at first, accusing Victor of interfering, but deep inside she knew he was trying to make up for years he had lost. She just didn't know if she was ready to let him. One afternoon, Aiden returned home to find Victor waiting outside their building. Instead of insisting on anything, he simply asked if the boy would join him for a walk. Aiden agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly out of an unspoken desire to understand the man who shared his blood. They walked through a nearby park, children playing around them as Victor spoke about his own childhood. He admitted he had grown up lonely, surrounded by wealth but starved of affection. His parents had been distant, always busy, always traveling, always building the empire he now managed. He had wanted something different, a life defined by people, not money. Elena had been the first person to make him feel human instead of an heir. Aiden listened silently, studying the man's expressions, the regret in his voice, the softness in his eyes whenever he said Elena's name. For the first time, Aiden saw not a billionaire, but a father trying to repair something fragile. Victor finally stopped and told Aiden he wanted to show him something. They drove to the mansion, and Victor led him to a room Aiden hadn't seen before. Inside were shelves lined with journals, photos, and sketches. Victor explained they were projects he had abandoned when Elena left. She had inspired every one of them, pushing him to invest in education, create scholarships, and build community centers. Her disappearance had made him lose direction, and though he had accomplished many things, he always felt something missing. Aiden walked around the room, noticing a small drawing pinned to the board, a sketch of a woman holding a baby. The date wrote on it was the year he was born. Aiden froze as Victor explained that he had drawn it after waking from a dream he didn't understand at the time. He had dreamed of Elena holding a child, and it had felt so real that he spent months trying to find her again. Aiden felt his chest tighten. This man had been searching for him long before he even knew he existed. That evening, Elena arrived at the mansion unexpectedly, having received a call from a neighbor saying Aiden had gone with Victor. She had panicked, imagining the worst, and rushed over. But when she entered the room and saw Aiden studying the sketch, something inside her broke. She realized that no matter how hard she had tried to protect her son from pain, she had also deprived him of connection, of a father who genuinely cared. Victor stepped toward her, not with the arrogance of a billionaire, but with the humility of a man who had lost too much already. Elena admitted she had been terrified of raising Aiden in Victor's world. She feared he would grow up entitled or lost, disconnected from the values she had worked so hard to teach him. But seeing Victor now, she realized he had changed. He had matured, learned, softened in ways she didn't expect. Victor told her he didn't want to take Aiden away or uproot their lives. He just wanted the chance to know his son, even if he had to earn it. Slowly, Aiden looked between them, sensing how much history lay unspoken in the room. He stepped closer, taking his mother's hand in one and Victor's in the other. For a long moment, the three of them stood in silence, bound by years of truth that had finally surfaced. Aiden whispered that he didn't want to choose between them. He wanted both. He wanted a life where his mother didn't have to struggle and where his father didn't have to miss out on watching him grow. Alina's eyes filled with tears, and Victor's voice cracked when he promised he would never try to replace her or take control. He just wanted to be present, to support them both in any way they allowed. Slowly, Elena nodded. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. A fragile, hopeful beginning. In the weeks that followed, their lives settled into a new rhythm. Victor visited often, sometimes joining them for dinner in their tiny apartment, never complaining about the cramped space or the peeling paint. Aiden spent weekends at the mansion, not to indulge in luxury, but to explore, learn, and build a bond he never thought possible. The divide between the worlds began to shrink, bridged by honesty, effort, and the desire to heal. Aiden's life didn't transform overnight, but it transformed in the ways that truly mattered. He gained not just a father, but a chance to rewrite the story of who he was and who he could become. And as Victor and Elena learned how to share the son they both loved, a new chapter began, one filled with the promise of family, forgiveness, and a future no longer shadowed by secrets.